Relying on each other for sustainable economic growth, the United States and China have fallen into a classic codependency trap. Codependency between America and China was born in the late 1970s when the US was in the grips of wrenching stagflation and the Chinese economy was in shambles following the Cultural Revolution. Over the years, this arrangement has morphed into a deeper relationship, lacking in savings and wanting to grow. The US relied increasingly on China's vast reservoir of surplus saving to make ends meet. Anchoring its currency to the dollar, the Chinese built up a huge stake in US treasuries, which helped America fund record budget deficits. America provided China with both stability and growth anchors. China enabled the US to sidestep mounting perils of subpar saving, reckless fiscal policy, and weak household income growth. But economic dependency is as unstable as human codependency. One partner eventually changes, while the other is left hanging, feeling scorned. China is now changing, and America doesn't like it. Not only is China rebalancing its economic model from exports to consumption, it is also redefining its national character. It has adopted a more muscular foreign policy in the South China Sea, embraced the nationalistic longing of rejuvenation framed by what President Xi Jinping calls the China Dream, and it has started to reshape the international financial architecture with new institutions such as the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank and the New Development Bank and the Silk Road Fund. China has transformed itself and the world's economy with it. In 1990, it produced less than 3% of global manufacturing output by value. Its share is now roughly a quarter. China produces 80% of the world's air conditioners, 70% of its mobile phones, and 60% of its shoes. The white heat of China's ascent has forged supply chains that reach deep into Southeast Asia. This factory Asia now makes almost half the world's goods. China has been following in the footsteps of Asian tigers such as South Korea and Taiwan. Many assume that in due course the baton will be passed to other parts of the world, enabling them to turn manufacturing into their way of prosperity. But far from being loosened by rising wages, China's grip is tightening. Low-cost work that does leave China is mainly going to Southeast Asia, only reinforcing factory Asia's dominance. That raises the question for emerging markets outside China's orbit, from India to Africa and South America. The tricky task of getting rich has become harder. The whole point of America is to be a consumer. As American consumerism has slowed, China's emerging middle class has been more than eager to buy more of its own goods. China's middle class is on fire. According to a study by consulting firm McKinsey & Company, 76% of China's urban population will be considered middle class by the end of 2022. That's defined as urban households that earn between $9,000 and $34,000 a year. That might not sound a lot, but it has been adjusted for prices in China, and it delivers roughly comparable middle class existence to other countries. In 2000, just 4% of the Chinese urban population was considered middle class. Another factor that is supporting China's consumer spending growth is its low level of household debt. China's household debt to GDP ratio of 40% is less than half of America's household debt to GDP ratio, as it is much lower than those of other developed countries. In addition to having higher incomes and low debt, the younger Chinese generation is more consumption oriented than its predecessors. Unlike generations that came before the 1980s, people in China have access to the stuff that consumers in the Western world do, and the younger generation is also not as frugal as their parents and grandparents. Their consumption spending is growing at a rate of 14% per year. That's twice as fast as the consumption growth for the last generation, those aged 35 and older. The young generation is expected to account for 53% of total Chinese consumption by 2020, up from its current 45% share. But America is not doomed. America went through the same process of manufacturing and consuming, and it helped build America. But then America went through the 1920s crash, which decimated the international and its internal economies. But history never repeats itself identically, and as the world already has superpowers of production and consumption, the effects of China's eventual fall will be more devastating if the US continues to rely on China to prop up its economy and lend it money. Because as both economies are linked so closely, one falling would be catastrophic for the world's economy. But China has become more independent and less reliant on the US. The US has two options: find another way to decrease its debt and stimulate the economy through multiplying exports, or fall like many other global superpowers before it.